My name is Arthinox, and this is Cloaked Mysteries. Throughout the centuries, some stories have hidden so deeply within the fog of time that they seem to carry ancient breaths, echoing like whispers that were never meant to be heard. Today, we journey to one of the most remote places on the planet where the silence of the ocean meets the secrets of a people who vanished without explanation. Easter Island, or Rapa Nui, is far more than a landscape. It is an enigmatic code that challenges archaeologists, historians, explorers, and anyone brave enough to face it. Prepare yourself to move through the layers of mystery surrounding the stone giants the Moai and discover what may have truly happened on this forgotten fragment of the Pacific. Imagine a tiny point in the middle of an ocean so vast that the very idea of direction becomes meaningless. Rapa Nui rests there like a scar left by the Earth itself. The distance to the Chilean mainland stretches beyond 3,700 kilometers, and more than 2,000 additional kilometers separate it from the nearest inhabited island. The isolation is so profound that, even on the map, Rapa Nui looks like a tear in the fabric of the world. And yet, this lonely fragment shelters monumental structures that defy any simple interpretation. Rapa Nui is a geographical, cultural, and historical paradox. Nothing on that island should have grown, prospered, or survived for so long, and yet it did. Its volcanic hills, rocky shores, and sparse vegetation form a landscape so unusual that many visitors claim they immediately feel something different in the air, something ancient, deep, almost spiritual. The island's energy is dense, heavy, as if it were observing every step you take. And this sensation becomes even stronger when you realize that every corner of Rapa Nui is guarded by unblinking eyes carved in stone. Centuries ago, long before Europeans set foot there, Polynesian navigators crossed the ocean without the aid of maps, compasses, or any technology we recognize today. They relied on the movement of the stars, the direction of the winds, the behavior of the currents, and even the rhythm of the waves striking their canoes. Armed with this ancestral knowledge, they left the Marquesas Islands and reached Rapa Nui, a journey so vast that many still consider it nearly impossible. The people who arrived were anything but primitive. They were sophisticated, skilled, and culturally complex. They built organized villages, created elaborate rituals, developed intelligent agricultural methods, and carved hundreds of monumental statues. They believed that their ancestors continued to protect their bloodlines even after death, and for that reason they transformed the island's landscape into a living monument. But the greatness of this civilization was also the seed of its ruin. After centuries of growth, competition between clans, environmental exhaustion, and extreme isolation began to erode the foundations of their society. What once was unity became conflict. What once was abundance turned to scarcity. Rapa Nui became the stage for a story as epic as it was tragic. When the first Europeans sighted the island in 1722, they found a people already weakened. Accounts describe cautious inhabitants, marked by internal disputes and struggling to survive in harsh conditions. Yet the true devastation was still to come. Religious missions attempted to erase the local culture, destroying symbols they deemed pagan. Epidemics brought from the continent decimated the population quickly, as the natives had no immunity to foreign diseases. As if that weren't enough, slave traders from Peru kidnapped a large portion of the population, including leaders, artisans, and wise elders who maintained oral traditions. The social structure collapsed like a wall losing its foundation. The Moai, once symbols of power, were toppled during conflicts and abandoned. The entire island seemed to suffer not only physically but spiritually. Many scholars believe that, in that moment, the sacred bond between the people and their ancestors was severed. And when a spiritual bond breaks, even the stones seem to weep. Since then, the silence of Rapa Nui has carried a profound mourning for all that was lost. More than 900 Moai are scattered across the island, some buried to their necks, others standing on ceremonial platforms, and many left unfinished on the volcanic slopes. Each one bears its own expression, as if telling a different story of a specific ancestor. They are not simply carved faces. They are petrified memories. They represent lineages, authority, families, and histories of clans who once fought for prestige. Each Moai required months of intense labor, And more than that, it required faith. Faith that the ancestors would guide the sculptor's hands. Faith that the community would unite in a monumental effort. Faith that the giant carved from stone would become a bridge between the material and spiritual worlds. It is impossible to look at them without feeling that the island is alive, watching, remembering. The Moai are the last surviving link that connects the present to Rapa Nui's distant past. For decades, the transportation of the Moai was considered an unsolvable mystery. How could tons of stone be moved over kilometers without wheels, metal, or draft animals? Countless theories emerged: rolling logs, wooden sleds, stone tracks. None completely satisfied the puzzle. Local legends claimed that the Moai walked on their own, guided by a spiritual force known as mana. For many, this explanation was poetic but unrealistic. Yet modern experiments showed that with ropes tied strategically, coordinated groups of people could rock the statues from side to side, literally making them walk. In a way, the myth was right. The Moai did walk. But they walked thanks to human ingenuity, synchrony, tradition, and perhaps a touch of spiritual conviction. The exact method remains debated, but science has successfully recreated much of the process. Still, when you stand before those giants, it's hard not to feel there is something more at play, something no archaeological study can fully capture. Wherever there is deep mystery, alternative theories will take root. And Easter Island has become fertile ground for bold imaginations. Erich von Däniken, the writer who popularized the ancient astronauts theory, suggested that extraterrestrial civilizations may have visited Earth in the distant past and influenced several megalithic cultures, including Rapa Nui. For many, the idea seems reasonable. How could such enormous statues exist in such an isolated place? How could they be so precise? Why would a remote civilization dedicate so much effort to something so monumental? Supporters of the extraterrestrial hypothesis argue that the key lies in mana not as a spiritual force, but as an unknown technology capable of moving massive objects. Others compare the Moai to Egypt's pyramids, the Nazca geoglyphs, and the stone platforms of Baalbek, suggesting a common origin for all these mysteries. Although science has dismantled many of these claims, the theory survives because it appeals to something deep within us, the feeling that we are not alone and perhaps never were. Science has played a crucial role in attempting to decipher the enigma of Rapa Nui. For centuries, researchers believed the engineering required to sculpt and transport the Moai exceeded the abilities of a completely isolated society. But as new discoveries emerged, it became clear that the island's ancient inhabitants possessed astonishing command over techniques that blended strength, strategy, and collective knowledge. They were masters of environmental observation. They understood the density of rocks, the direction of prevailing winds, and the contours of the land. Nothing was done by chance. Each Moai was planned as a spiritual and social vessel. Yet even as science explains the physical process, it falters when trying to understand the profound motivation behind these constructions. Why would such an isolated people dedicate centuries of their existence to creating colossal figures? What drove them to invest so much energy into monuments with no immediate material benefit? These questions hang in the air as if the island itself refuses to reveal its secrets. You can measure a statue's height, calculate its weight, analyze its composition, but no modern instrument can measure the faith, symbolism, fear, and reverence that fueled that civilization. Researchers remain puzzled by the Rongo script, a writing system unlike any other on Earth. It resembles no known alphabet, suggesting it developed independently in the heart of Polynesian extraordinarily rare achievement. Tablets bearing these inscriptions have survived, but no one has been able to decode them. This means that a significant portion of Rapa Nui's ancestral knowledge remains locked away in wood, out of our reach. And even when scientific explanations seem sufficient, a shadow lingers. Certain details simply do not fit the speed at which the civilization developed, the sudden religious shift, the dramatic transformation of its rituals, and the rapid collapse. It is as if an invisible force accelerated their rise and then hastened their downfall. This blank space, this unresolved gap, is precisely what sustains the worldwide fascination with Rapa Nui. In the end, science guides us closer to the truth, but it does not deliver it entirely. It illuminates part of the path while allowing the deeper regions to remain in darkness. And perhaps that is why the same question echoes from the moment the first European explorer stepped onto the island who truly built the Moai. Today, Rapa Nui is a living, breathing territory where ancestral memory flows like a quiet river beneath the modern surface. The descendants of the ancient navigators still preserve the Rapa Nui language, their myths, rituals, and stories passed down for generations. They carry in their blood the legacy of a people who challenged the open ocean and built one of the most impressive monuments in human history without ever losing their spiritual connection to their ancestors. Walking across the island, you can feel the weight of this heritage. Every fallen stone, every tilted moai, every broken ceremonial platform seems to hold the breath of a people who still live there, even if their bodies are long gone. The wind that sweeps through the slopes of Reino Ruraku sounds like ancient whispers, as if the island were retelling its story in the language of the wind. Archaeologists and restoration teams work tirelessly to preserve the moai and their ceremonial platforms, but the true battle is against time itself. Rain slowly erodes the volcanic stone. Pacific winds cut into the giant's surfaces. The land attempts to reclaim what was returned to it, and still, the moai endure. Standing, fallen, or buried to their necks, they remain silent witnesses of human persistence. Rongo Rongo, too, continues to be one of the last undeciphered scripts on Earth. If it is ever decoded, it could rewrite everything we know about Polynesian history. It might reveal the spiritual purpose behind the moai, the forgotten rituals, the internal wars, the original myths, and perhaps even the reason the sculptures were abandoned. To the casual tourist, the island is merely an exotic destination. But to those who look deeper, it is a living archive, an open-air museum shaped by the elements, filled with stories that push the boundaries of imagination. On Rapa Nui, nothing is merely what it seems. Everything carries symbolism, memory, intention. And despite the destruction that struck the original population, their legacy endures. It vibrates in the earth, echoes in ceremonial songs, and manifests in the stone ancestors watching over the horizon. Rapa Nui stands today not because the world preserved it, but because it refused to disappear. Easter Island is not just an archaeological mystery, it is a mirror, a silent reminder of human greatness and fragility. The moai remain there, motionless and unyielding, embodying the strength of a people who braved the ocean, raised giants, and rebuilt themselves after immense loss. When we look at these colossi, we aren't merely seeing art, we're seeing symbols of a civilization fighting against oblivion. Perhaps the real question is not how the moai were made, but why. What faith could move tons of stone? What belief could unite entire villages in a monumental effort? What spiritual bond existed between the living and the dead strong enough to justify centuries devoted to carving faces in stone? And then there is the lingering enigma. Why do they stare toward the horizon, as if waiting for someone? Are they ancestors guarding their descendants? Beacons for distant travelers? Messages for civilizations beyond Earth? Or simply witnesses of a world that no longer exists? The truth is that even with countless theories, no answer feels complete. And perhaps that is the irresistible charm of the island. It does not want to be fully understood. It wants to be contemplated. It wants every person who encounters it to leave transformed. In the end, the moai remain standing not to explain the past, but to challenge the present. They ask us, silently, if we are still capable of creating something so grand that it withstands time. If we are still capable of believing in the impossible. So now I ask you, traveler of the Cloaked Mysteries, which theory do you believe best explains the enigma of Rapa Nui? Share your thoughts in the comments. Your insight may illuminate the next piece of this ancient puzzle. And of course, subscribe to the channel, because there are still many mysteries waiting for the right questions.